Lindsay. Welcome back to another video. Today I have another digital stamp along with you. I'm going to be using Joy Clair Stamps again for this. And again, I am using Photoshop Elements for my project today. So the first thing I want to do is open up my stamp set in it. For that, I'm going to click Control O or go up to File and Open, and then I'll go in and find the set I want to use. For this, I am using the Ooh La La stamp set, new from Joy Clair Stamps. I'm using the PNG version. Now this has a completely clear background on it. So when you see those little squares, that's what that means. That means that the background is clear or transparent. That's what you want when you have a PNG. Now, before I take these into a new file and I start to layer them up, I am going to fill in the portions of the image that would be solid with some white. So I went down to my color and I made sure white was on top, and then I'm going to use my paint bucket tool and start clicking in those areas. Now, as long as the area is enclosed with a black line, it's going to fill in those areas with white. So here, the top of the brush, the midsection of the brush, and the bottom of the brush all need to be clicked and filled in with white because those areas on a normal brush would be solid. So just go ahead and click in any areas that would be solid on a normal item and click those in with white. Now this is where if you wanted to not color your image later on, you don't have to fill these in with white. You can choose whatever color you want. I do that a lot of times whenever I am making stickers with my digital stamps, which I do have a video about. I will leave that linked in the top right hand corner. Now, if any time you feel like things are getting filled in too much or not enough, you can go down in your paint bucket tool and change the tolerance down there in the bottom. Now it's time to start bringing these images into a new project. So I am going to open up a 4¼ inch by 5½ inch with a 300 DPI background and a white background project. This is what I like to work in. You can work in whatever size you're working in with your card, or if you want to do just like a full sheet of stamps or stickers or whatever it is you want to do, just make it the size of your project. I'm doing 4¼ by 5½ because that's the size of my card front. So I want to make sure that I scale everything to the right size. Then I go back into my original document. I just crop around the image I want to use, go back to my new project, and drag and drop from my project bin. It's really quite simple. Then I can go back to my stamp set, undo the crop, and just go in and find the next image I want to use and crop around it. Now I did get a question about why I used the crop tool and not the magic lasso tool. That's simply just for ease. I just like to do it with the crop tool. Unless I am going in and saving each individual image, then I will use the lasso tool. I'll show you how to do that in another video. But just know, if you're using Photoshop Elements and you're a little bit more experienced with the program and you want to use the magic lasso tool, use the magic lasso tool. It works just the same. You're just not dealing with as many layers, and it's a little bit more simple to just click the back button than deal with all those different layers and renaming and whatnot. So now that I have both of my images that I want to use into my new project, I am going to mess around with the size of them, the orientation of them, twist them, turn them, mess with the order of them. So I want the little compact in front of the lipstick. So I just made sure that that was further away from the background. The closer something is to the background, the further back behind objects it's going to be. The further away from the background it's going to be, you're going to bring that more forward in front of objects. So once I had those like I want them, I'm going to kind of link the layers or kind of select both of them just by clicking my control button on my keyboard and clicking both layers so I can move them together. I don't want to permanently link them right now. I just want to keep them together as I twisted them because I decided that I wanted to rotate my image. I want, instead of having a vertical card front, I want a horizontal card front. I thought with the design I was ending up going with, it would look a little bit better. So I went to image, went to rotate, and then rotated my image 90 degrees to the right. And then it's just about messing with the size. I also decided that in the mirror, I wanted to go in and put some text. So I'm going to go ahead and click my back button on my stamp set, crop around the Ooh La La sentiment, and then I will just go ahead and drag and drop that right into my new project. Then I can mess with the orientation. So I'm going to go over and click my move tool and make sure I'm moving the right thing. If you accidentally move something you're not supposed to, just use your undo button, your back arrow. It's your best friend when you're working with digital images. Now, whenever you bring an image into a new project, it's going to be straight. I wanted to turn this a little bit, and you can do that right with the move tool. Just go to a corner, and then once it has the arrow with the two ends on it instead of just one, then you'll be able to turn the image you're working with. So once I had that done, this is kind of where the fun in digital stamps and the ease of digital stamps really comes in. I was not sure where I wanted to go with this and what sentiment I wanted to use. So I went back to my stamp set, I cropped around one of the sentiments, and then drag and dropped it into the new project. Now, normally I would just have to kind of guess which sentiment I wanted to use, see which one I thought looked best, but here, all I need to do is drag and drop it into this project, and then I can play around with where I put it, where I end up, where the size of it ends up, the orientation of it, all those different kinds of things. So I brought in this longer sentiment, and I went ahead and just started adjusting it, seeing where I thought maybe it looked best, what I was going and envisioning with the card front. And what I decided was I didn't really love this sentiment in there. And in a matter of fact, I really wasn't crazy about any of the sentiments in the set to go with the design I had in mind because none of them had the orientation that I wanted to use. It's not that I don't love the sentiments, I do. It's just that none of them worked with what I had in mind. So here's the fun part. I can go ahead and create my own sentiment. So I'm going to go back to my stamp set, close it out because I am done with it. Make sure you do not save any of the changes. And then I'll go back into my little card front that I'm working on and I'll create my own sentiment. I'm using the text tool to do this, and I have all different kinds of fonts that I have downloaded for free from the internet, which is very easy to do, and a ton of websites that you can do it from. I decided that I wanted my sentiment to say hello beautiful, so I'm going to go ahead and type that out. Now I started with this font and I'm not crazy about it, to be honest. But here's the great thing about the text tool and digital stamps in general. You can play around with everything. So I went ahead and thought maybe it'll work if I put it here, if I put it there, if I decrease the size, but I wasn't crazy about it. So I went ahead, made it a little bit bigger like I had it earlier, and then I am going to see which font I like best. So I will go back to my text tool, or I'm going to click back until I get all my separate layers again so I can move this around and kind of center everything on the card panel once I'm done. And then I'll type out my sentiment again, highlight it, and then I can go through, and as I go through each one of my different fonts there, it's going to change as I scroll through them and hover over different fonts. This is a great way to see which font you think looks best with what you're going for. So I have a ton of different fonts, a ton to scroll through, but it does give you a little sample off to the right side so you can kind of see what you think might look best. And then when you hover over it and it highlights it in blue, you can see the font changing on the project itself. So that way you get a good idea of what you want it to look like and what fonts look good together on your project. So I'll go ahead and keep scrolling through this. Now, as I scroll through this, I will leave a few websites that I like to use personally, um, that I download fonts from. Now, I will also leave a Pinterest board that I have on my Pinterest account where I am constantly posting free fonts that I like, different seasons they work with, different combination of fonts that work really well together. So I will leave that link down below as well in the description box. So this process takes me quite a while to just find what I think looks best. I ended up going with something really, really simple. And then once you have the one you want, you just click on it, click the little green check mark, and then you get to play around with the sizing and exactly where you want it placed. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, and then I'm also going to center it above my images. Then I can go over to my layers tab, hold down my control button, and click on each layer and move them around and center them on the panel. I did this because I wanted a good idea of how big I needed this. I knew I wasn't going to have this on a rectangle panel. I knew I was going to die cut this image out, so I knew about the size I needed it to be. And that is a really great thing to have in mind, and also a really great use of your rulers on the top of your screen and also on the side, so you can get a good idea of how big this is going to print out and what size die you will actually need. Now, once I have everything where I want it, I'm going to flatten my image and then print it. I printed it onto 80-pound cardstock, and I did use my laser printer for that. Then it was time to die cut. Now I am going to die cut this with a little bit larger oval and then die cut a frame using that same larger oval and then a smaller one inserted. I wanted to make sure this was spaced evenly, so I used both of them to space it out, and then I'll take that smaller one out, just keep the larger one on there and die cut it. Then I will place them back together on the cardstock that I want to use for my frame. And I'm holding that down with a little bit of delicate painter's tape. And then once I have that run through my die cut machine, I can go ahead and take it out of the dies. I'll have a smaller oval that I can use for another project. And then that larger one is my frame that fits perfectly over my die cut image that I die cut the first time, which is great. Now for coloring, I did use my oil-based colored pencils. I'm not going to try to pronounce the name because I butcher it each and every time. The coloring of this project is going to be over on Instagram. It's just too much to share in this longer video. But it's fairly simple coloring. I didn't use any OMS or anything. I just used the pencils themselves. Now I went ahead and put on that frame. All I did was put a little bit of liquid glue on the frame, and then I'll just line it up. That liquid glue gives me a little bit of playtime, so I am able to move this around, get it aligned perfectly, and then to get rid of a little bit of that curl from my laser printer, I just flip that over and put an acrylic block on the back to hold it flat while it dries, and that really helps to straighten it out. While that's drying with the acrylic block on top, I'm going to quickly create the background on my card base. Something that is my go-to. I'm just going to stencil on it because that's what I do. I'm using the micro brick stencil from the Crafters Workshop and peacock feathers distress ink along with my mini ink blending tool. I'm using more of that delicate painter's tape to keep the back of my card base clean and also hold that stencil in place so nothing shifts around on me. Now I started darker towards the center and went lighter towards the edges. That's just something that gives the card base a little bit more interest and a little bit more dimension without adding any extra bulk. Then I just take off that piece of painter's tape. The back of my card stayed clean and I've got my card base ready to go. The only thing left to do was popping up that image with a little bit of foam tape right in the center of the card base. Now this is totally optional, but I just like the added dimension and a little bit extra something it gives to this card. I took glossy accents, something I have not used in a while, and put it over the mirror portion of this stamp. Now the great thing about the laser printer, I did not have to worry about the ink running. It held up really well under the glossy accents. And it looks a little foggy right now, but you'll see in the photos it dries crystal clear, doesn't do any cracking, but it just adds that little shine and extra dimension over the mirror portion. That is it for the card. I hope you guys enjoyed another look at creating this digital panel and how easy it really is. That is going to do it for me today. Now there's a lot of information down in the description box below, so be sure to check that out, along with the full supply list is down there too. Thanks for watching everyone and happy crafting!